Hi, Book 2. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for a 7 on Sunday topic. This is the topic for October 15th. And apparently, it looks because I don't read cozy paranormal, so I couldn't do the first two topics of this month of October. So, but I am able to do the last ones. I think I'll be able to do the very last one, but so this topic is paranormal or monster book recommendations. So here are my top seven paranormal monster book recommendations. So the first one is, and some of these I have already talked about. So this first one is one that his author is a famous horror writer, although he doesn't just write horror. He also writes fantasy and coming-of-age stories, and that's Stephen King I'm talking about, and his son Joe Hill. And this is so far the only, well, actually no. I've also read Horns by Joe Hill, which was also great, but I don't have it. I got that one from the library, but that was really great. And I still am not seeing the movie adaptation with Daniel Radcliffe, but I do want to see it. So I'm not going to recommend that one, but the only reason I'm not recommending that one is because I don't actually have that one with me. But I am going to recommend Nosferatu by Joe Hill, which I've recommended before. This is kind of his Joe Hill's take on the vampire. So it's kind of a mixture of taking place around Christmas. It's kind of themed around Christmas and summer. So you have our main character, our protagonist, Victoria, and we find out that she has a gift for finding things that are lost. And if it's lost somewhere far away, she has her magical bike, and this magic bridge that she crosses, and that leads to the thing that was lost, where it was originally, where it was lost at. And so we're just going to call him a serial killer in her neighborhood that will kidnap kids, promise to take them to the magical land of Christmas Land, in his Wraith car. And he has an assistant deal with the parents, who he will drug them with what is known as gingerbread gas and do some stuff that doesn't even bear mentioning. It's very disturbing. And something happens to the kids where he steals their life force, and they basically turn into little vampires type creatures. And he promises to take them to Christmas Land, where they can stay young forever, and they don't have to deal with their mean parents, and they can have Christmas all the time. And Vic, when she's a preteen, finds herself at this guy's house. Charlie Minx is his name. But she is the one that got away, pissing off Charlie. And somehow, after the fight with her and the people that try to protect her, she ends up getting, I think she's a teenager at the time when this happens. She's a teenager. And she ends up, he ends up getting put in a coma and seriously injured. And this traumatizes her for the rest of her life into her adult years. She ends up, the guy who rescued her, she ends up hooking up with him, gets pregnant, and has her own child. And Charlie, well, he's planning his revenge while he's in his coma. And there's the looming threat that he's going to wake up and he might just come after her own child for revenge. This is so creepy and atmospheric. There's some very disturbing stuff that isn't even supernatural in this book as well. And like with the assistant Bing, with Charlie Minx's assistant Bing, and like I said, it's a very unique take on the vampire lore. And also, it kind of kind of taints Christmas a little bit, makes Christmas a little more, think about Christmas a little more deserving with Christmas music and everything. And it's just in this world, the world, when we finally do get to Christmas land, the world is so creepy and weird looking. I mean, like I said, I want to watch the adaptation AMC, which Max does have access to AMC Plus, so I might be able to watch it finally. But yeah, so weird. And Charlie, oh my god, he is terrifying. Of course, Bing, I think, is even more terrifying because he's just a human. Like, Charlie Minx is a supernatural entity, and immortal, has lived for a long time and is basically a vampire. And so you kind of know what you're going to get with him and how terrifying he is and how much of a literal monster he is. But with Bing, he's a human being. You're like, how can you be? What is wrong with you? Like, I think it's more terrifying when you're dealing with a real life, like a human being that's just seems like a normal person, and but they're not. There's something wrong with them up here. Like, he never really grew up in a way. And I liked Vic as the main character. She was, a very tortured person, and like, her journey was really engaging to read about. And I was so constantly worried about her and, her son and what was going to happen if Charlie woke up. And I really liked her, her boyfriend, I can't remember his name, but he is really sweet. And I also like that he's a big nerd. He's just such a total nerd. Like, he asked to name their son Bruce Wayne. So that he's such a sweet character, and he's also a big guy. He's fat, so it is nice to see that he's just an average guy, not like muscular and a guy, the hero, type of, it has the hero's build and everything. He's just a regular guy who's trying to do the right thing, and he's a big old teddy bear, and he's just, and I like that is, and I like that he's the love interest, and I mean, not a love interest, but he's, the father of Vic's child, and he just wants to protect Vic and his child. And also, I think it's cool that Vic is a bit of an artist. And it is really a terrifying but really good book. So that's my first supernatural paranormal rec. And then we have number 2, which is an older one, and that is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. And I recently also talked about this one. So this is actually part of a series, but I think it's a series where you could get away with reading the other books, reading them. You don't have to read them all in order or all of them. But this takes place in a small town where this magical circus carnival comes to town. It kind of does a similar thing to the night circus, but it's not as whimsical and fun. It's it's more scary because the ringmaster, I'm just gonna call him the ringmaster, is like, I can give you, whatever you want, but there's a price. To what I give you. You can't just get it for free. And he starts to lure our main characters are these two 13-year-old boys. And one of them is being tempted to become part of it. I feel like this is like the night circus meets the Cabinet of Souls. That Goosebump, R.L. Stine movie. And he ends up, and one of the boys is very suspicious and terrified, and is trying to fight back, and him and him work together with his father to defeat this carnival and the ringmaster of this carnival. First of all, I love that there's like, the father is not just dismissing his son, and be like, oh, that's just your imagination is running wild. You're just a kid, and oh, don't be silly, it's harmless. Like, I like how the father believes him and helps him out, but not just to condescend him, but actually helps him and actually believes him and is trying to, help him defeat this carnival. It's also very creepy and just so weird. And I think carnival, I love the idea of, an autumnal carnival. I mean, I guess because the fair always happened around this time of year. But I always think it's fun. That kind of thing is always really fun, especially this time of year, and it's really spooky. And carnivals are always like creepy to me because like they're fun and I love going to them, but at the same time, there's a creepiness to them. And it's just so the supernatural is really kind of a little more subtle. It's not like obvious vampires or werewolves or anything, but it's the idea of like there's not monsters. It's more focused on the paranormal aspect than the monsters in this one. While the other one, Nosferatu 2, was more focused on the monster, this one, like I said, is more on the atmosphere and the creepiness of it and making a deal with the devil kind of thing. So that's a Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. And then we have one where I currently am reading the second book in this trilogy, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Now, people compare this to Twilight, which there are similarities to Twilight, like with the romance of being like a mortal and a vampire, although Diana's a witch, and I think she's a more self-assured, confident person than Bella. Like, I don't think she's as much like and I think she's a little less a damsel in distress because she's a very powerful witch. Even though for the longest time she did not use her magic, she's able to, like, she rescues herself practically in the climax. And she stands up to Matthew, the vampire, and that she's not as submissive to me as Bella is. And also, I love the whole history aspect and her doing the research because Diana is a historian. She and it takes place. A lot of this book takes place in Oxford, and some of it takes place at Massachusetts, and some of it actually takes place. I think, or maybe they are in France, and they're just in a castle in England. I can't remember. So there's a lot of history, but there's all these, not just witches and vampires, but there's these, I don't know if you say demons or demons, but instead of them being like the little minions from hell and all that, they're actually these people, humans that have special powers and like special abilities, and they're immortal and they're very creative. So I think that is really cool. And just so actually this one would probably apply to the other last Sunday's category of paranormal cozy recommendations, but I don't have enough of them. I only have this and I wanted for sure. And then of course, I want the people who read Twilight. But I don't have enough. This is the only one that I have. Well, unless the next book I read, maybe you would consider that cozy in a way. But not cold, like. But anyway, it's so much fun. I love all the magic and learning about the lore and then the history, doing all the history in the deep dive, and the fact that the main part of it is not just about her discovering her magic learning and her being too powerful, but also there's the whole idea of the manuscript, the Ashmole 182. I think that's a cool concept in this. Like, I love the idea of stories that involve like an object or a manuscript or something, like a document. I think I always like those kinds of stories. So like if you grew up with Twilight, you might like this. Will probably, and if you haven't discovered this book, check out this because it does have some similarities to Twilight, at least in the romance aspect of it. This might be the next level up. So that is A Discovery of Witches, and it is a trilogy, although there is a fourth book. So actually, it's not a trilogy anymore. But next is then we have The Historian, by Elizabeth Costovo, and this is paranormal light. There's more of a hint of paranormal. But this is a story about this historian. We don't get her name. Her father also was a historian, and they have been living in Europe. And she finds a book with a dragon on it in her father's library, and learns from her father over a period of him telling her this story over time about how his own mentor had discovered that Dracula might still be not only alive, but he might have been a real person. As in like Dracula, as in the vampire. And his mentor went to hunt him down. So our main character's father, when he was a young man, went to go look for his mentor and to find out if this was true. And he comes across this woman who helps him, and it turns out she is the daughter of the love child of his old mentor. So they work together and fall in love as they're trying to go on this mission. So it's a story within a story within a story. Although there's not as much focus on the story with the mentor as there is with our narrator's father and our narrator. So there's a little hint of vampire action. There's not a lot. Like, I think if you're a fan of, a lot of vampire action in today's vampires, you might not love this as much. Because there's not as much of the vampire stuff, but there is a little hint of it. And so this might be a loose recommendation because it doesn't have as much paranormal stuff or as much monster action, but I still think it's worth the read. Especially if you're also into dark academia. There is a possibility of like a vampire coming out, hunting them down in this book, and it's just, again, it's more about the atmosphere. It's creepy and unsettling. You keep working, and they also get to explore a lot of Eastern Europe, which I think is really cool. Because they travel there, and they're not just reading the books or anything. They actually travel throughout Eastern Europe. So it's, like I said, it's a loose with paranormal and the monsters, but still there is at least a little bit in there. So this is the only one that maybe it's pushing it to be on this list, but it's still in there, Like I said, if you're, if you are really a hardcore paranormal person, that's what you want, maybe The Historian is not for you. But maybe if you lean more towards the dark academia side of things, then you might like that one. Next, we have Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. So this is the only Stephen Chbosky that I've read. I have not read Perks of Being a Wallflower, which is a little bit shorter than this, but I absolutely love this book. So we have our two main characters, Kate and her son, Christopher, are fleeing her abusive boyfriend. They come to Middle America, this small town, in Pennsylvania. And when their new home is very close to this woodsy area that they are told that you probably don't want to go in there. And she's also worried about her son, about Christopher getting lost in there. But Christopher finds himself ended up in those woods, and he's lost for 6 days. And when they finally find him, he is a little different. He's a little more, does a lot better in school. He proves he's somehow a little bit smarter at certain subjects that he wasn't good at before. And he's weird stuff happens when people come into contact with him. And Christopher, it turns out that Christopher has a little bit of an imaginary friend that he communicates with. And this friend has told him that he needs to build this tree house before Christmas in the middle of those woods. So he gets with his new group of friends that he's made, and they work together to build this tree house. But meanwhile, the weird things that happen when people come into contact with him is affecting slowly over time, affecting the whole community, and a lot of weird stuff is going on in this community. A lot of things are happening to people, and it's just something's not right. And Kate is very worried about her son. So this kind of explores good versus evil, the battle between God and the devil, and also this relationship between Kate and Christopher, and just people, and the whole idea of this domino effect of this whole community falling apart, and the whole idea of skeletons in the closet. The only author that I've seen really explore that topic is Stephen King, and he does a really good job, but so did this. This was really great, exploring, a small town, and how little things can happen to the people in this town, how they make these bad choices, and how they all have dark secrets that they want to keep hidden, and they hide it behind their religious beliefs, or their relationships, or their image. They always find ways to hide things, or and this book really explores that, and what happens if you keep it all bottled up and something provokes you to let it out, whatever is bothering you. And it's so creepy and just so weird. I liked Christopher as a sweet little boy that was, and just, it's such an interesting exploration of all that. And I just think, it's so weird because you don't know if what we're dealing with, his imaginary friend, if they're a good guy or not, if they're a good entity or not. If you can trust them, and what, there's a lot of times where he goes in an in-between type of place, and it's so such a fascinating story. And there's a little bit of a magical, there's also some supernatural, and it's just really good. Like I said, it's hard to sum up a book that you really like, I feel like, when you're actually enjoying it. I feel like everybody says that, and I think it's true that it's easier to talk about a book that you hate or just dislike than it is to talk about a book that you love. Because I personally feel like I'm repeating myself with things. I'm not saying anything different. But yeah, this is really good. Okay, so the last book is also one I've talked about before. This was introduced to me after Darlene Desi had read this book a few years ago, and it sounded really cool. So I finally bought it for myself a couple years, a year ago. And that is Dracul. Dagger Stoker, written by Dagger Stoker and J.D. Barker. So Dagger Stoker is the great grandson or grandson of Bram Stoker. And he talked about in the author's note how his Bram Stoker had possibly actually believed that vampires were real, and that when he wrote Dracula, which had a lot more content than what we have today, than what we had, the final product that we have today, and he told his agent or publisher or whatever that this was a warning to people about vampires, because he believed vampires were real, and he was absolutely terrified. And that book was all about that. And of course, at the time, I don't know what was going on historically. Like maybe it was a plague or something. But people were already paranoid and afraid of something. So his agent was like, no, you can't traumatize people with that. You can't do that. You cannot tell people vampires are real because they'll freak out and they're already dealing with stuff. So he had to take out a lot of content and had to change things and pass off as fiction. Well, this story takes that and basically explores that. And I don't know if it's based on his Bram Stoker's notes or whatever, or something I actually haven't, like notes that he said. Well, I guess I would. Well, I would have to read it again to look. But this is supposedly the idea of what actually happened to Bram Stoker. I mean, I think it's a fictionalized version of what happened, and that his nanny might have been a vampire, the woman who raised him when his mom and dad weren't. And he ends up and she ends up giving him blood to save his life. But it has some strange consequences, and she gets fired. And years later, as an adult, him and his siblings decide to go find her. And it turns out they are also being followed by someone who might be a real vampire. It's, again, I don't know what other words to use, but creepy and weird and unsettling, and just, I like that it kind of, the idea of vampires, maybe they're real, and this is what really happened, what inspired Bram Stoker. I think just that whole idea is fascinating to me. Like, I don't know if I would want vampires to be real or not. I mean, I love vampire content, I do, but I don't know if I would want them to be real, but it is very intriguing and fascinating, the concept and the idea of, are they real? Or, like, Bram Stoker actually believed they were real. And that his original Dracula was meant to be a warning about that. It's really good, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Dacre Stoker seems to be a really good writer. I haven't read anything else by him. I think I'm familiar with J.D. Barker, but I don't think I've read anything by him either. So I would love to read more books by both of those. But if you're a fan of the original, or if you didn't, because I didn't love the original, I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't like my all-time favorite, and I prefer just watching movie adaptations. But if you do like Dracula, please check this out. I think it's really interesting to read this. Because of, if you're a fan, of Dracula and the idea of Dracula, or whether you love the original story or not, but you love Dracula, I think this is great and perfect to read right now, this time of year, for obvious reasons. But yeah, so there's a lot more vampire action in this one than the Historian, that's for sure. So I think if you're looking for more vampire action, check this out. Dracula by Dacre Stoker and J.D. Barker. Okay, so that is my paranormal or monster recommendations. So next Sunday, the 22nd, will be paranormal monster books that aren't on my team here. So I will see if I have any of those. If not, you might not get that one if I don't have anything. I'm gonna, hopefully it won't be all rereads, but there might be some rereads that are on there. But anyway, so if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't. Click the bell notification below when you want to be notified. And please feel free to share what your favorite monster and paranormal books are. I would love to know. And also, what are some of your favorite paranormal movies, or TV shows? If you watch movies and TV shows, feel free to share those as well. And like I said, I hope you like this video, and I hope you're reading something spooky or autumnal at least right now. All right. Bye.